Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on something that a lot of people deal with, melasma. But what's really cool is that we're going beyond the usual, the typical modern medical view.
But we're bringing in Ayurveda too.
Right. We're going to see what Ayurveda, this ancient system of medicine from India, calls Vyang.
And get this, our source actually combines both. It's like having this conversation between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge research.
Pretty awesome.
I know, right? So today, it's all about getting this full picture of melasma, or Vyang. What do these two systems agree on? Where do they differ? And how can that help all of us better understand this condition?
I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. Okay, let's start with the basics, the modern medical perspective on melasma. What exactly are we talking about here?
So melasma, in modern medicine, is considered an acquired pigmentary disorder. Basically, that means it's a skin condition that develops over time, and it shows up as these hyperpigmented macules.
Yeah, macules. They're like patches of skin that are darker than the surrounding area, and they usually pop up on the face.
Okay, so we're talking about those darker patches that some people get on their face. What do those patches usually look like?
Well, they tend to be pretty symmetrical. Often you'll see them on both sides of the face in a similar pattern, and the color is usually brownish.
Brownish, okay. I have heard the term cloasma before, especially when talking about pregnancy. Is that the same thing?
You know, you're right. People do use that term sometimes, especially with pregnancy, but melasma is the preferred term these days. Cloasma kind of implies a greenish color, and that's not really how it usually looks.
Good to know. So we've got the name straightened out. Now, the research we're looking at points out that melasma, even though it's not physically painful, can really affect people's lives.
Absolutely. It's right there on your face, so it can really knock your confidence. And it's actually pretty common. We see it a lot, especially in women, particularly during those reproductive years.
Makes sense. Hormones and all that.
Exactly. And it also seems to be more common in people with darker skin tones, those Fitzpatrick skin types 4 through 6, Hispanic, Asian, and African American individuals.
So it's not just women, though, right? Men can get it, too.
Oh, yeah. Men can definitely get it, too, but it's way less common. The ratio of women to men with melasma actually varies quite a bit around the world. Like one study in Singapore found it was a whopping 21 women for every 1 man. But in India, it was closer to 4 to 1.
Huh. That's a huge difference. I wonder if lifestyle factors in those different regions play a role.
It's definitely possible. That's a question that researchers could explore further.
Absolutely. So what does modern medicine say causes melasma? What triggers it?
Well, the exact cause is still a bit of a mystery, but researchers have a few prime suspects, and genetics seems to be a big one. You often see melasma running in families. There was this study in Brazil, for example, where more than half of the people with melasma said they had family members with the same condition.
So if your mom or dad had it, you're more likely to get it too.
Seems that way.
Yeah.
Like you've got this genetic predisposition that makes you more vulnerable to melasma when other triggers come into play.
And one of those triggers is good old sunshine, right?
Yep, UV radiation from the sun is a major culprit. Even if you don't get a sunburn, those UV rays can stimulate melanogenesis, the process that produces melanin, the pigment that gives our skin color. More melanin, darker patches.
So basically, the sun tells those pigment-producing cells to pump up the volume.
Exactly. And it's not just about the direct effects on the DNA and skin cells either. UV radiation can also mess with the membranes of melanocytes, the cells that actually make melanin. Plus, it can trigger inflammation and increase histamine in the skin, all of which can contribute to hyperpigmentation.
And we can't forget about hormones, can we? Especially since it's so much more common in women.
Hormones are definitely key players here. Melasma being so prevalent in women, particularly during pregnancy, the mask of pregnancy, some call it, and in women on birth control pills, that really points to hormones. There's even research that suggests that estrogen can ramp up the activity of tyrosine, a key enzyme in melanin production. So those hormonal shifts can trigger or worsen melasma.
Makes sense. And what about things from outside the body? Like, are there medications or things in cosmetics that can cause this?
There are. This medication, phenytoin, which is used to prevent seizures, can sometimes cause pigmentation that looks just like melasma. About 10% of people who take it experience this, but the good news is it usually fades away when they stop the medication.
That's good to know. And what about cosmetics? I never would have thought about that.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so, right? But some ingredients in cosmetics can actually make melasma worse. Things like tar, certain hydrocarbon derivatives like benzene and xylene, and even some low-quality mineral oils. These can cause phototoxic reactions when your skin is exposed to the sun, and that can lead to, you guessed it, hyperpigmentation.
So it's not just the sun itself, but how our skin reacts to the sun after being exposed to certain ingredients.
Exactly.
Wow, it's getting complex. And the article even mentions other things that might be involved, like the way different skin cells communicate, the role of fibroblasts, which are these cells in the deeper layers of the skin, and even tiny blood vessel
Right,
abnormalities.
there's so much going on. They even talk about the pH and ion transport within those little melanosomes where melanin is made and stored.
Yeah.
There's so many factors that could be influencing this whole process.
It really is complicated. So when a doctor is looking at melasma, how do they classify it? I noticed there were a couple different ways in the article.
Yeah, dermatologists have a couple of ways to classify melasma. One way is by looking at how deep the melanin sits in the skin. This gives us epidermal, dermal, and mixed melasma.
Epidermal, dermal, mixed. So it's about the layers of the skin. What's the difference visually between these types?
Okay, so epidermal melasma, where the pigment is mainly in the top layer of the skin, that usually looks like light brown patches. And get this, it often shows up more dramatically under a Wood's lamp. That's a special UV light that dermatologists use. Also, epidermal melasma often responds better to treatments that target the skin's surface.
Makes sense. It's closer to the surface, so easier to reach with treatments. What about dermal melasma?
Dermal melasma, that's where the melanin is deeper down in the dermis. This one tends to have a bluish-gray color, doesn't really change under the Wood's lamp, and it can be trickier to treat.
And then mixed melasma is, I'm guessing, a combo of the two.
You got it. Mixed melasma usually looks like dark brown patches, since you've got melanin in both the epidermis and the dermis. It might show some contrast under the Wood's lamp in some areas, but not in others. Treatment response for this one is, well, kind of in between, often partial.
So knowing where the pigment is helps doctors figure out the best treatment approach. Got it. What's that other way of classifying melasma?
The other way is by looking at the pattern of melasma on the face. There's centrofacial, the most common one, which affects the center of the face. Cheeks, forehead, upper lip, nose, chin, all that. Then there's malar, which hits mainly the cheekbones. And lastly, mandibular, which appears along the jawline. They actually looked at how often each pattern occurs. Centrofacial was the most common, about 63%, followed by malar at 21% and mandibular at 16%. So a dermatologist would note both the depth and the pattern to really understand what's going on.
Makes total sense. All right, time for the big switch. Let's move from modern medicine to Ayurveda and see what they have to say about this condition, what they call Vyang.
Okay, so in Ayurveda, skin conditions fall under this broad category called kushta. Kushta basically means discoloration of the skin. And then there's kshudraroga, which translates to minor skin ailments. The article says Vyang falls under kshudraroga, and it's described as painless, small, and usually blackish in color.
Blackish sounds a bit different from the brownish we were talking about earlier.
You picked up on that. Nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Maybe the way they perceived and described colors was a bit different, or maybe Vyang includes those darker shades too. But what's really fascinating is how Ayurveda explains what causes Vyang. They say it's mainly due to an imbalance in these fundamental energies called doshas, specifically Pitta and Vata. And get this, they believe these imbalances are often triggered by too much anger and hard work.
Whoa, anger and hard work. That's a completely different story from genetics and hormones.
Right, it's a whole different way of looking at it.
Can you break down these doshas and the tissues involved a bit more?
Totally. So Ayurveda has these three main doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, that govern everything in the body and mind. Think of them as like the operating system. Pitta is all about heat, transformation, which ties into skin pigmentation, right? Vata is about movement and circulation. In Vyang, they specifically mention Udan Vayu, a subtype of Vata that relates to upward movement and skin complexion. And then there's Farajak Pitta, a Pitta subtype in the skin that's responsible for its luster and pigment.
Okay, so we've got these energies at play. What about the tissues that are affected?
Right, the dushya, the tissues, they say rasa dhatu, which is the nutrient fluid, and raktarato, the blood tissue, are involved. Because of the blood tissue connection, Vyang is considered a rakta pradosha vikar, meaning a disorder stemming from impurities in the blood.
So it's not just a superficial skin thing, it goes deeper.
Exactly. Ayurveda sees it as this deeper imbalance affecting tissues within the body.
Now, how does Ayurveda explain the actual development of the condition, the step-by-step process?
They call it samprapti. Basically, the idea is that aggravated vata, often from things like anger and overworking yourself, teams up with an aggravated pitta dosha. This combo then suddenly shows up on the face as those blackish, thin patches. So anger and pushing yourself too hard, Those are seen as key triggers that mess with the body's balance, especially the Pitta dosha that governs skin health and pigmentation.
Wow. So emotions and physical stress can show up on your skin. Fascinating.
And they break it down even further, all the elements involved. They list the doshas, Vata and Pitta,
Right.
the dushas, Rasa and Rakta, the location, the skin of the face,
Oh,
the pathway, external channels, Rasva, the nutrient channels, and Raktava, the blood channels.
wow, it's very detailed.
Oh, it is. They even specify the type of channel vitiation, which they say is sang, meaning obstruction or blockage. The digestive fire is vishamagni, which means irregular. And finally, the prognosis is salhaya, meaning treatable. So it's this whole interconnected system, how they view disease development.
Really holistic. And what about the symptoms? How do they describe what Vyang actually looks like and feels like?
Well, the main symptoms are those patches suddenly popping up on the face. They're painless, small, and, like we said, blackish in color.
Just like modern medicine categorizes melasma based on depth and pattern, Ayurveda also has different types of Vyang, right?
Yep. They categorize it based on which dosha is the most out of whack. So you've got Vatika Vyang, which is blackish, rough patches.
Right.
Vatika Vyang, which has those patches with a blue center and a copper-colored edge. Kaphaja Vyang, those are whitish, itchy patches. And finally, Raktaja Vyang. This one has a copper-colored center, a blood-colored edge, and often comes with burning and tingling.
Very specific descriptions, each one linked to a particular dosha.
Exactly. It connects what you see on the skin to the internal imbalance they believe is causing it. That blood-colored edge in Raktaja Vyang especially emphasizes that blood tissue connection they talk about.
So it's not just treating the symptom, it's about addressing the root cause.
That makes sense. Okay, we've covered how both systems understand this condition. Now, how does Ayurveda actually approach treating Vyang?
All right, so Ayurvedic management, according to the article, is all about a multi-pronged attack. First and foremost, they emphasize Nidan Parivarjan. Basically, that means avoiding the things that trigger it, so less anger, less intense work, especially under the sun.
Get rid of the root cause. That makes sense in their system. What else do they do?
Next up, Shodan Chikitsa, purification therapies. These are all about detoxifying the body and rebalancing those doshas. The article specifically mentions bloodletting, which they call Sharavidan. This is aimed at removing what they believe is impure blood.
Bloodletting. Wow, sounds intense. It does. Right. It might seem extreme by today's standards, but it's still a part of Ayurveda, although a qualified practitioner would decide if it's appropriate based on the individual's specific needs. They also talk about apayang, which is therapeutic massage using specific medicated oils like manjishadarisaneha, kumkumari tailam, kasaidigrita, and sarshap oil. And then there's nasya, administering medications through the nose, particularly Bringrad-Svar's.
So those are the purification techniques. What about pacifying therapies?
Shamachikipisa. This involves using remedies and lifestyle changes to calm those imbalanced doshas. For internal use, they list a bunch of herbal and mineral formulations like Ganpachan Charan, Samraji Charan, Avogachari Gutika, and Kadirudak.
Those sound like traditional Ayurvedic remedies.
They are complex mixtures of herbs, minerals, and other natural ingredients. They've been used for centuries to address imbalances in the body. For external use, they have a whole arsenal of lepa. These are like medicinal pastes or ointments that you apply directly to the skin. The article gives this huge list of formulations: Burning Mahakashaya, Eladigana, Manjistari Lepa, Ayurvedi Lepa, and so many more.
Wow, it's a long list. Are there any common ingredients or actions that these lepas target?
Great question. While the exact recipes differ, many of these lepas include herbs known for brightening the skin, reducing inflammation, and regulating pigmentation. You'll often see manjista, which is Indian madder, chandana, that's sandalwood, and all sorts of other plant extracts. The goal is often to pacify pitta dosha in the skin, improve skin tone and texture, and reduce those dark patches using natural methods.
It's amazing how many different remedies they have.
Right. Each formulation is designed to address specific aspects of the dosha imbalance and how Vyang is showing up. They also mention Udvar Tan, which is a powder massage using formulations with ingredients like shirish, lamajak, nagkizar, lodra, and a combo of haritaki, lodra, neem leaves, karanj, and dadim bark. And then there's Angrag Lepa, another type of external application.
So topical treatments are a big deal in Ayurveda.
Big time. Internal therapies are important, but they really emphasize these external applications too.
It seems like they've got a remedy for every variation of Yang. The article actually ends by highlighting this great treasure of Ayurvedic remedies, single and compound, for addressing Vyang.
Ayurveda really emphasizes a holistic approach. It's
Yeah.
not just about getting rid of the dark patches. They want to restore the balance of the doshas that they believe are the root cause.
It's fascinating to see how these two systems approach the same problem in such different ways. So where do they connect? What are some similarities between how they view melasma and Vyang?
Well, one thing they both agree on is that this condition, whatever you call it, can really affect a person's confidence and well-being. Both systems acknowledge that those changes in your skin can cause emotional distress, and there's some overlap in the triggers they identify. Modern medicine talks about UV radiation from the sun, and Ayurveda advises avoiding too much hard work in the sun. So both recognize the sun's role.
That's true. They both see the sun as a factor, but the main causes they propose are totally different, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Modern medicine focuses on genetics, UV radiation, and hormones as the main drivers. Ayurveda, on the other hand, it's all about the doshas, that Pitta and Vata imbalance, often triggered by emotions like anger and physical stress like hard work.
And since their explanations for the causes are so different, their treatment approaches are different too.
For sure. Modern dermatology uses things like hydroquinone, retinoids, and corticosteroids, as well as procedures like chemical peels and laser therapy, and they really emphasize sun protection. Ayurveda, though, they're all about internal purification therapies, herbal remedies, both taken internally and applied topically, and addressing the root cause by changing your diet, lifestyle, and even how you manage your emotions.
It's so interesting to see how these two systems tackle the same thing with completely different philosophies and methods.
It really is. It's amazing to see the variety and history of those herbal and natural remedies in Ayurveda, some of which have been used for centuries. Modern science is just starting to investigate how effective some of these compounds might be, but Ayurveda looks at how they all work together in complex formulations and how they can be tailored to each individual's unique constitution.
So, to wrap up our deep dive, it's clear that melasma and Vyang are the same condition, just viewed through different lenses. Modern medicine and Ayurveda, they both have something to offer, even though their explanations and treatment strategies differ.
That's a great way to put it. Ayurveda offers this holistic view, focused on energetic balance and a rich tradition of herbal medicine. Modern medicine provides this detailed understanding of the physiological and environmental factors at play.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Ayurveda talks about things like lifestyle and emotions like anger. It makes you wonder how these things might actually interact with the genetics, hormones, and sun exposure that modern science has linked to skin conditions. Could it be that our internal state and our physical health are even more connected than we realize? It's definitely something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.